Hello, friend. This is Steve Haverly. Let's talk for a second today about the idea of control of our lives. Now, it's great when we control our own lives, when we decide and set out and have that control. That's wonderful. It creates happiness in us when that happens. But there are some times that ruin our happiness and begin to drag us down into despair. And let's talk about those for a second. And this happens frequently in our lives. First one is when we let other people control us. Now, I want you to understand that no is a perfectly legitimate answer to any question somebody asks you. Now, I'm not advocating that every time someone asks you to help them or for advice or for your time or for your money or whatever it may be, that the answer should always be no. That's the farthest from the truth. But what I have seen so many times in my life and experienced it myself and with other people, I've heard a lot of people complain about others controlling them. And when I really look at it, it's not any control that person actually owns over the other person. It's the control that they give the other person. It's the control that they allow that person to have over them. I worked with a guy one time who said his brother always called him when he got ready to sit down to a meal. He said he called me all the time. And I said, well, what did you say to him? And he said, well, I always said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm getting ready to eat a meal. And then he just kept talking and talking and talking. And he would get so upset because his brother didn't, quote, take the hint. And I said, well, what's wrong with just simply saying, I'm just sitting down to eat. How about if I call you back right afterwards? But he just wouldn't. He thought there was something wrong with that. But it's that kind of thinking that keeps us frustrated all the time. These things happen on a daily basis in our lives. Something that happens that frequently that you get so frustrated with, if you don't change that and allow it, your life is not going to be happy and content because you're going to constantly being frustrated by some of these little things that people have control over you in your lives. So one of the first things we need to understand is to take the control back from other people. Okay, don't allow other people. Should you be rude? No. Should you be mean-spirited and hard-hearted? Absolutely not. We're not even discussing here about how to go about doing that and the demeanor and how you should handle yourself. That's something for another time. But just realize that every single time somebody asks you to do something that you don't want to do, you don't have to do it. You're not a bad person if you say no. No is a perfectly legitimate answer. The second way that control affects our lives negatively, and I feel like this one is really one that sneaks in on people, and they don't really understand a lot of times the dynamic that's happening. But it's when let's just say me, for example, when I try to control other people's behavior. This begins a process in our lives of never-ending stress and strife. If I were to try to control my loved ones around me, and control my coworkers around me, control my friends, control what they like, control where we go, control all of the situation, and this happens so many times in our lives, and before what the reason is we don't realize that we've gotten into that kind of a state of activity. We become a person that is trying to make everything happen the way we want it to. When you're dealing with other people, that's just not possible. Yet, we believe that it is, and we try to accomplish that all the time. Hence the kind of frustration that comes out in our lives that causes us to be so frustrated. There are just so many things and so many relationships in your life. You couldn't possibly control them all, and yet we try. And yet, from time to time, we find ourselves trying to manipulate or, to try to get the outcome to be what we decided it would be, rather than just letting it happen. When you're friends with somebody, we shouldn't have this power struggle going on. It should just be both people with an open dialogue, considering one another's feelings, and coming to a conclusion on our own in a natural and peaceful and gentle way, not one or the other trying to control. So when you feel like people are trying to control you, your peace flies out the window. Especially when you feel like you're trying to control others in your lives and all the situations and the outcomes there, you'll never have any peace to start with. You'll never even have any peace to be able to work with, and there will be no contentment in your life, because you will constantly be like walking and dancing on a bed of coals, trying to keep everything the way you want it to be. You'll never be able to accomplish that. The other way of control is to release it. This is the best thing we can do for ourselves to have the kind of happiness we want in our lives, is to let things be the way they are. Now, that doesn't mean I shouldn't try to achieve objectives and goals and try to accomplish things in my life. That's not what we're saying here. But trying to control the outcome of everything around me and to release that becomes great freedom in our lives when we give up the control and just understand it's not my job to make everything work out the way it should in other people's lives, and just release that out away from us. Then we have opened the door to let peace and contentment reside in our lives. So giving up that control, you gain so much freedom and happiness and contentment that you'll find it unbelievable when you finally realize it's not your job to control everything. So there's your little tip for today. This is Steve Haverly. I think you'll make it a great day when you try that one.